What would you do if you found a death certificate with your name on it, signed, stamped, and dated for a day you haven't lived yet? I thought it was a sick joke, until I realized every person who'd died in my family had started asking questions right before they disappeared. Growing up in the quiet town of Maple Hollow, Vermont, I always thought my family was just reserved. We weren't cold or cruel, just quiet. Dinners were silent except for the sound of forks scraping against plates. Questions were answered briefly, emotions tucked away like fragile heirlooms no one dared to touch. I used to envy my friends whose parents laughed loudly or argued passionately. In my house, silence was a rule, an unspoken one, but powerful enough to shape every conversation. My father, Thomas Cole, worked as a financial advisor. My mother, Carol, ran a small antique store that smelled like dust and secrets. My older brother, Logan, was the golden child, obedient, charming, and effortlessly calm. I was the opposite, curious, restless, always trying to make sense of the things no one would explain. The silence started to bother me after my uncle, Mark, vanished. The official story was that he'd taken an overseas job, but even at 14, I knew it didn't add up. His car was still in the driveway for weeks, his tools still in the shed. When I asked where he'd gone, my parents' faces froze in that same tight, polite smile they used for strangers. Uncle Mark needed a change of scenery, Dad said, his voice steady but distant. Don't ask more than that. And so, I didn't. Not for a while, at least. Years passed, and life moved on. I went to college in Boston, built a new life, and tried not to think about the strange quiet of my childhood home. But the unease never fully left me. It followed me in dreams, flashes of hushed arguments behind closed doors, the faint smell of bleach in the basement, and the way my mother would flinch whenever the phone rang after dark. Everything changed the winter I turned 27. It started with a letter, no return address, just my name written in an uneven hand I almost recognized. Inside was a single photograph, a man standing in front of a rundown motel in New Jersey. He looked older, thinner, but I knew that face. It was Uncle Mark. Scrawled on the back were 4 words that made my stomach twist. Ask about the others. I stared at that picture for hours, my heart pounding. The handwriting, it was his. I compared it to an old birthday card he'd written me when I was 10. Same slanted M, same sharp K. But how could he have sent this if he was supposed to be working in Europe? I called my parents that night. Mom sounded nervous from the moment she picked up. Sweetheart, is everything okay? She asked. I got something strange in the mail, I said. From Uncle Mark. Or, someone pretending to be him. There was a pause, a long one. Then Dad's voice cut in, sharp and controlled. Ethan, don't entertain nonsense like that. Your uncle's gone. He wanted a fresh start. Let him have it. But Dad. Enough, he said, in that tone that ended all conversations. For the first time in years, I felt that same cold silence from my childhood sink back into me, only now it scared me. Because silence, I realized, wasn't just a habit in our family. It was protection. And protection from what? That night, I dug through the old family photo albums I'd brought with me. There were pictures of birthdays, picnics, Christmas dinners. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something strange. Certain people appeared once, maybe twice, and then never again. Cousins, uncles, even an aunt I barely remembered meeting. Each time, the next page showed some kind of moving on, a family trip, a new house, a new car. It was as if every disappearance was followed by a celebration. I looked back at Uncle Mark's photo one more time. Ask about the others. For the first time, I understood what that meant, and I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child in that too quiet house, fear. After the letter arrived, I couldn't sleep for days. Every creak of my apartment floor made me flinch. I kept imagining someone watching me, maybe even following me, waiting to see what I'd do next. By the 3rd night, curiosity won over fear. I decided to do what Uncle Mark had asked, ask about the others. The first other I remembered was my cousin Emily. She used to visit every summer when we were kids, but one year she just stopped coming. I called her old number, disconnected. I searched her name online, nothing. Not even a social media account. It was as if she'd been erased. I spent hours scrolling through public records, trying combinations of names and birth years. Then, I found something that made my chest tighten, a death certificate for an Amelia Cole, same birth year, same hometown, listed as deceased in a car accident in upstate New York, 2 weeks after Emily had supposedly moved there for college. The pattern felt too familiar. Uncle Mark's job overseas. Emily's college transfer. Both clean exits. Both followed by death records in different states. The next morning, I called my parents again. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you remember Emily?" There was a pause, then her voice softened. "Of course, honey." "Why?" "I found something about her. A death certificate under a different name." "Did she ever change her name to Amelia?" Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. "Ethan, don't do this." "Do what?" "Digging," she whispered. "You sound like your uncle did before he left." "Before he left. Not before he died." She caught herself. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked. "Where's Uncle Mark? Where's Emily? Why can't I find anything about them?" She exhaled shakily. "Please, Ethan. Just let it go. For your own good." Then she hung up. That night, I printed everything I'd found, the letter, the photo, the records, and laid them across my kitchen table. It looked like a detective's case board, except every red thread led back to my family. The more I stared at the evidence, the more the pictures started to form. People who asked questions disappeared, and their disappearances were explained by neat, bureaucratic lies, relocation, job changes, new identities. Then death certificates followed. I didn't tell anyone about what I was doing, but someone must have known. A week later, I came home to find my apartment door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but all my printed records were gone, replaced by a single note, sitting in the middle of the table. It read, "Stop asking. You're not ready." The handwriting wasn't Uncle Mark's. It was my father's. After that, I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever was happening wasn't paranoia, it was real. I drove back to Maple Hollow for the first time in years. The air smelled like pine and rain, but everything else felt suffocating. My childhood home looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile, like it might collapse under the weight of its own secrets. Dad greeted me at the door, expression unreadable. Mom stood behind him, eyes red and tired. "Ethan," he said flatly. "You shouldn't have come. I need answers." He sighed. "You've always been too much like your uncle." He couldn't leave things alone either. We sat in the living room. The same furniture, the same wallpaper, but the family photos had changed, some were missing entirely. Spaces where frames used to hang were now just faint outlines on the wall. "Where's Uncle Mark?" I asked. "He's gone." "I know that." "Where did he go?" Dad's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "There are things in this family that keep us safe. Questions break that safety. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get if you want to stay alive." He stood and walked toward the hallway, signaling that the conversation was over. But as he turned, I noticed something in his hand, a folded paper. I caught a glimpse of my own name on it before he tucked it into his jacket pocket. My blood ran cold. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I drove to the only place that still felt neutral, the old library where Uncle Mark used to take me when I was a kid. The librarian was gone, replaced by an elderly man who didn't look up when I entered. I went straight to the archives and started searching for any records of the Cole family. What I found made my stomach drop. Between 1975 and 2005, there were multiple death certificates under various Cole relatives, all filed in neighboring states, all signed by the same notary, Thomas Cole. My father. I kept digging, and soon another pattern emerged. Every death certificate was followed by a large life insurance payout, always to the same three beneficiaries: my father, my mother, and a relative named Martha Langston. Aunt Martha. She died when I was 12, or so I'd been told. The next morning, I went to her old address, a cabin on the edge of town. It was boarded up, but the padlock was new. Inside, through the dusty window, I saw boxes stacked neatly against the wall, labeled with years: 1994, 2001, 2010. On one of them, written in red marker, were the words: Claim files, verified. As I backed away, a truck pulled up behind me. It was my father's. He got out slowly, his face expressionless. I told you to stop. You forged death records, I said. You killed them, for money. He shook his head. Not killed. Relocated. It's business, Ethan. People disappear every day. Some for freedom, some for survival. We just learned how to profit from it. I stared at him, speechless. You don't understand what this family is, he continued. You think we chose this? It started long before you were born. We kept it alive because we had to. Had to. I spat. You murdered your own brother. He hesitated. Just for a second. And that was all the confirmation I needed. He stepped closer. Go home, Ethan. Forget what you saw. You still have a chance to walk away. I looked at him, at the man who'd raised me, and realized he wasn't protecting me, he was warning me. That night, I packed a bag and left town. As I drove through the dark woods, my headlights caught something on the roadside, a small white cross, half buried in leaves. A name was etched into it, Logan Cole. My brother. Except Logan was alive, or at least, he had been last month when we texted. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. The date carved below the name was next week's. That's when I understood, they weren't just covering up old crimes. They were preparing new ones. I didn't go home that night. I drove until the highway signs stopped looking familiar, pulling into a roadside motel near the state border. My hands were still trembling when I unlocked the door. The room smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the small white cross carved with Logan's name. The date, next week's date, echoed in my mind like a countdown. Was it a warning? Or a promise? I turned on my laptop and began digging deeper into state records. Every search led me to another forged certificate, another fake identity. The deeper I went, the more I realized the pattern wasn't confined to my family, it was part of a network. The same notaries, the same insurance companies, the same names appearing in different states. My family wasn't alone in this. They were just one branch of something larger. And then I found it, a database entry showing that my own name had been flagged by an insurance provider. Policy pending. Beneficiaries: Thomas Cole, Carol Cole. My death had already been scheduled. That's when the motel phone rang. I froze. No one knew I was here. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Ethan, my father's voice said. Calm. Controlled. You've made this harder than it needed to be. How did you find me? You're not as good at hiding as you think. Come home. We can fix this. Fix what? You mean cover it up? There was a pause, then his tone hardened. You've seen too much. You're forcing our hand. The line went dead. Outside, a car engine started. Headlights swept across the curtains. My pulse spiked. I packed my things in seconds, grabbed the folder of documents I'd printed, and slipped out through the back door. The night air was sharp and wet. I could hear footsteps crunching gravel on the far side of the lot. 2 silhouettes, one tall, one shorter. My parents. They were here. I ducked behind a dumpster, holding my breath as their voices drifted closer. He's scared, Mom whispered. We can still talk to him. It's too late, Dad said. The paperwork's done. It has to look consistent. Paperwork. My death certificate. My brother's cross. Consistent meant final. I waited until they passed, then ran. Through the trees, across the empty field behind the motel, until my lungs burned. My car was parked a quarter-mile away. I didn't look back until I was on the highway again, heading south with shaking hands gripping the wheel. I drove for hours until sunrise, stopping only when I reached a larger town, one with a police station. I told myself I'd walk in, hand them everything, and tell the truth. But when I parked across from the station, I froze. What if they were part of it too? What if the network extended beyond my family? Instead, I called the only number I hadn't yet, the one listed on the back of Uncle Mark's old business card. A faint hope that he might answer. After 3 rings, a woman picked up. This is Special Agent Rebecca Shaw, she said. Who's calling? I hesitated. My name is Ethan Cole. I think you've been investigating my family. There was a long silence. Then she said quietly, where are you? An hour later, I sat in a small cafe, clutching a cup of coffee I couldn't taste. Agent Shaw arrived, mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that made you feel both seen and safe. She slid into the seat across from me and set down a folder thick with documents. My family's names were on the cover. We've been watching them for 2 years, she said. Insurance fraud, identity forgery, and suspected homicide. But we could never connect the deaths to direct financial gain until now. I handed her the photo, the letter, the cross. My brother's next, I said. She flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. They've done this before. Every relative who questioned them disappeared within weeks. The payout pattern is always identical. She looked up at me. Ethan, you need to understand, your family isn't just one cell. They're part of a national operation. People who make their own disappearances profitable. Her words didn't surprise me anymore. They just made everything feel heavier. What do I do? I asked. We'll protect you, she said. But you have to testify. Everything you've seen, every document, every detail. You'll never go back to your old life, but you'll be alive. I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. That night, she moved me to a temporary safe house, an old farmhouse surrounded by woods. 2 federal agents watched the property in shifts. It was quiet, almost too quiet. On the second night, I woke up to a faint noise, the sound of gravel crunching outside. My pulse jumped. I crept to the window and saw a familiar car parked by the gate. My father's. He was standing in the moonlight, looking directly at the house. I whispered, he found me. Before I could move, a shadow appeared behind him, Agent Shaw. She shouted a command, her gun drawn. My father didn't run. He just raised his hands and said calmly, you can't hide him forever. This doesn't end with us. The agents took him into custody that night. My mother was arrested the next morning. 2 days later, Shaw showed me a stack of files they'd recovered from the Cole property. Dozens of forged certificates, insurance records, and relocation plans. Some dated back 40 years. My uncle's handwriting was among them, but his name was also on a witness statement. He'd turned against them before he vanished. Shaw looked at me across the table. Your uncle helped us start this case. He's alive, under protection. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. But it was mixed with a deep, bone-level grief. Everything I'd ever known about my family, every memory, every quiet dinner, had been built on a foundation of lies. That night, I wrote down everything I remembered, the silences, the disappearances, the warnings. I realized that my father had been right about one thing: asking too many questions could destroy you. But silence would have destroyed me faster. It's been 6 months since the night my parents were arrested. Sometimes it feels longer, like another lifetime that doesn't quite belong to me anymore. I live under a different name now, in a small town somewhere out west. The mornings are quiet here, but it's a different kind of quiet, one that doesn't make my chest tighten. I work at a local repair shop, drink coffee that's always too bitter, and try to convince myself that peace is just another habit you have to learn. Agent Shaw still checks in sometimes. She says the investigation into the larger network is still ongoing, that my testimony helped unravel a dozen more families doing the same thing. It doesn't make me feel like a hero. Mostly, it just makes me tired. My brother Logan never came home. They never found a record of his death, or of him living under another name. Some nights, I still dream of him standing by that wooden cross, whispering something I can't quite hear. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's forgiveness. I keep Uncle Mark's photograph in a drawer by my bed, the same one that started all of this. He reached out to me once through Shaw, said he was proud I'd done what he couldn't. That means something, I guess. But the hardest part isn't the fear. It's the memory of the silence, how comfortable it used to feel, how easily I lived inside it. Now, I fill every day with noise, music, conversation, even laughter when I can manage it. Because silence, I've learned, is where secrets grow. And I'll never let them grow again.